Hey everyone, look out. Your open source lab may have just shut down. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Friday. It's Alan Schimmel for Techstrong Gang. Boy, this one promises to be epic. I think you're going to really love what we've got. We've got an amazing gang. We've got a live studio audience. We've got the applause and laugh track signs ready to light up. But we've got some really good stuff to talk about. But first, let me introduce you to who we got talking today. First of all, coming at us from Huntington Beach, where she just got off the backpack trail. Can we still say you're a Futurum analyst, Camberly?
No, officially May 2nd was my last official day. I'm turning all those responsibilities over to, you'll see Guy and a bunch of other people that are showing up here. But I am, you can say I'm an analyst.
You'll always be an analyst to me, lady.
There we
Emeritus.
go.
Analyst Emeritus. Stephen came up with your new title. Beautiful.
I just need more time to go and backpack and hike and all that kind of stuff.
We all need that.
And root on the Yankees. It's our favorite Yankee fan in Colorado, Camberly Bates. Hey, Camberly, it's good to have you on, and thanks for coming on. Also joining us from deep in the heart of Austin, Texas, R2, our good friend Robert Reeves. Robert, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. You know, look, when I really looking forward to this weekend, because when I'm not struggling to balance the, that push and pull between open source and capitalism, I like to work on old Chevy square bodies. And I've got an
Is that 84. Like a box Nova kind of thing?
No, it's not.
I'm older than you. A box Chevy was a box Nova to me, but Mitchell shaking
I got
his head.
An 84 old Army Blazer, and the last part I need is coming in Saturday. And,
very cool.
We'll finally get it shifting out of first gear.
Last part. Oh
yeah. The last part.
Good for you, man. Always the last part. All right, moving on from Texas, let's go up to Colorado. We've got our guitar dude, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitch, how are you?
Really good. You know, I don't know who to call now to phone a friend when I'm not sure what to say because everybody's here.
Everyone is here. This is
awesome.
You know, I felt like I was running a shuttle bus today, picking people up at the hotel, the Techstrong Express. But not here, but in D.C. at the Nutanix conference. And he has friends, I hear, over there, too, who are going to be making guest appearances. Our chief content officer and, well, another big Yankee fan, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm well. We may have a guest appearance for the B-Blocks. Stay tuned.
That would be cool. Yeah, so stick around. And then making his debut in studio for the first time, weighing in at a lean svelte, I don't know.
Let's not guess that.
Let's not even guess. I'm not good at that anyway. But he is the founder and president of Tech Field Day, frequent gang member, guest, our good friend Stephen Foskett. Stephen, welcome to the big time here.
I know, right? I wasn't really supposed to be here, but I'm here in the office with for meetings, and I just couldn't resist sitting in Bonnie's chair here at the table.
It's a pleasure to have you here, my friend. Good for you. All right, hey, let's jump into things. So here, universities are being cut off from funds and losing their tax-exempt status and everything else. But now, my, lions and tigers and bears, they're shutting down open source labs. Mike, what's the deal here?
Well, the deal is it seems like they're trying to pass the hat around. They need $250,000 to keep this open source lab open, and it's not clear where that's going to come from. I guess they lost some funding from the federal government, like everybody else in the university these days. But Robert, I know you track this open source space pretty closely. Is this going to become endemic? Are we going to see more of this out there? Because, well, who is going to fund open source?
Well, the sad news is, yes, it will continue. There is a pushback across all of IT about where are they spending money? Is it part of open source foundations or, look, if companies that rely on open source are unable to make a business case to leadership for budget, those budget items are going to get cut. And it really comes down to companies, both providers of technology that is based on open source, but also consumers like large banks. They need to understand that if they don't support and fund these organizations, then they're not going to have a business. It's not going to be immediate, but it is going to be a real challenge going forward. They need organizations like Open Source Labs, Linux Foundation, Apache, Rust Foundation, all of them, Eclipse, to continue to do the good work that allows open source to do what it does, which is to build and grow non-differentiated technology so that these companies can build their applications on top of it. We are going to continue to see more and more challenges around funding these organizations.
Robert, sometimes when these, pressure gets put on budgets like this, and great labs like the open source lab, come under scrutiny, or they need to go out and get funds. It's never fun, but one of the outcomes can be, hopefully it doesn't get shut down, but it does kind of get focused on, do we really need this? Yes, we need to fund it. Maybe there's a different model. They need to add some additional, we might do some custom projects for people as well as, general work. There's opportunity in those tough changes to maybe adjust the quote unquote business model for that. So given that they're working between open source, and industry, I would imagine they'll have some of those conversations. So hopefully that'll lead to a good outcome.
Well, I would hope so too. Oh, I'm sorry.
It looked like when I was doing some of the research for this call, it looked like their funding had been decreasing over time. And that gets back to what you're saying, Mitch, is kind of like, where is the business value that they're bringing back to the people that are participating in it? And I'm also wondering if this has been around for a very long period of time. We've progressed to a certain level with open source in the market. It's almost ubiquitous in terms of organizations using it. So the maturity of it is much higher, and maybe whatever OSU is doing right now, it's more of where open source used to be as opposed to where it is today. Would that be possible?
It could be. One of the examples I was thinking of is maybe they can, not to use the EAI word, but you can start to modernize some of it, and that might attract some funding for it too. So you kind of have to rethink new possibilities when these situations come up.
I got an idea. You know what? The Beavers had a couple of good football seasons there. You got these players making NIL money, $5 million each for college kids playing football. Can't they pass the hat around, come up with $250,000 to keep this open source thing open?
Well, I did look at the endowment. The endowment is $891 million.
But Alan, they're at the wrong university in Oregon.
Well, the Ducks did have a better year. You're right. But the Beavers, I think, had a good year of the year before.
Well, sure, but I'm talking about Uncle Phil.
Yes, Uncle Phil does give the uniforms there. You're right.
Which is interesting to me. Where is my Phil Knight in technology? Where is my Phil Knight, who has made quite a bit of money off projects coming out of universities? I look, let's not forget where Netscape came from, out of the University
of Illinois.
And so, yeah, exactly. And so there is, I like what Lance is doing at Open Source Labs. He's he hit the alarm, pulled the alarm, and is seeking help. And I think that they're going to get that. $250,000 is a rounding error for a lot of these companies. But there is a huge amount of value that they're providing because, yes, they do general hosting, but the number of platforms that they support is outstanding. They've got a mainframe. They've got System Z. And so for open source projects wanting to expand into the mainframe, this would be a great way for companies like banks, insurance companies that depend on mainframes, to make certain that the open source that they depend on is working great on that mainframe. That would be the way I would go and collect money for this. If I was Lance, I'd be going and targeting large organizations dependent on mainframes and dependent on open source because they've got a great asset there.
You would think IBM would kick in some money for this particular project, but Alan, what's the probability that open source projects maintainers are going to look outside the US for places to host their projects? And heavens to Betsy, they might even go to China.
Well, you know what? If we're talking universities and labs, yes, excuse me, China and even Europe are, they're actively recruiting these kinds of researchers and labs and so forth. But, there's two issues here in my mind. One is the university scene, which is where a lot of pure research and science get done that leads to huge commercial breakthroughs, such as a young Mark Andreessen working on Mosaic and so forth, right? Becoming Netscape. But the bigger issue is open source funding. I've been around the open source game for many, many years. And open source funding probably closely follows the S&P 500 curve, right? When things get tough, a lot of companies all of a sudden, and Robert, I'm sure you saw this at the LF, right? Things get tough. I know we signed up for $1 million, but I could probably only do $250,000. Or we're going to have to pull back a little bit. I'm sorry, our budgets are being cut. Because at the end of the day, it's hard for them. It's a dotted line to revenue, open source, supporting these.
And that's the challenge. The dotted line needs to be a clear, broad, very dark line. And I would argue that that is the responsibility of foundations, open source contributors and maintainers, and the users. I think that open source consumers, people that are inside large Fortune 500 Global 2000 companies, need to get better about sharing the value of these projects with leadership and help them understand that, yes, we are saving money by not being tied to a vendor. We're able to negotiate better with our vendors by using open source and open standards. That is saving us money, but it doesn't just happen. We need to support these projects. I'd argue that that commitment of funding is far less than what they would pay to a vendor if we go back to the bad old days of proprietary tech and vendor lock-in.
Yep. But some people can't see beyond their nose.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to, I'm afraid. But look, this isn't a lot of money. I think as a couple of you said, I think this particular case will have a happy ending. What's the bigger picture for open source funding? I think that's going to be really dependent on whether, how the economy goes.
I just look, Alan, forward to fundraisers in the lab with football players showing up, for autographs from the football team.
Well, what you do is you get a big fake gold chain and you give it out to the football player who gives the most money to an open source thing.
There you go.
It works for interceptions, fumbles.
It's like, would you want to buy popcorn like the Boy Scouts?
Yeah,
You want to pay donate to the lab.
Alrighty. Hey, let's take a break here on the gang. We're going to come back and, Mike and maybe a special guest are at Nutanix. Is it Nutanix Nation?
Nutanix Next.
Is that what they're calling
Next.
it? It's next, but someone slipped Nation in here. All right. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, we're back here on the gang. As I mentioned earlier, Mike Vizard is down in DC at the Nutanix Next event. And, birds of a feather flock together. Somehow he hooked up there with Guy Currier. Guy, of course, is Visible Impact Principal Analyst, Futurum Analyst, and man about town, as it seems. So Mike and Guy, give us a live report from the scene.
All right, well, we're here with about 4,500 of our closest friends who are all descended into DC for this Nutanix.next conference. And the big news of the show is an alliance with Pure Storage. They are going to build a new type of system that's kind of a hybrid in my mind, at least. And it's trying to take the best of what they call hyper-converged structure and apply it to a 3-tier architecture and see if they can scale, but still make it simple. Guy, I know you've been in a lot of these meetings. What's the probability of this thing? Because right now it's just a preview.
But I think it's high probability. I think the primary motivation for it, Mike, is current Nutanix customers asking for it. So I imagine they probably have a lineup of at least, half dozen to a dozen current Nutanix customers currently running Pure Storage for applications who want to include that in their NUS, that's the Nutanix storage system, included in their NUS management. Probably because it's the same applications that they're already using Nutanix for. So I think it's extremely high probability. I don't really take it as a way to expand market for Nutanix, because Nutanix has a big fat market expansion target right now, thanks to our friends at Broadcom. But I do think that they're addressing a current customer need to extend storage management outside of the hyperconverged that they've traditionally done with Nutanix into a number of different areas. As you know, not news. Dell PowerFlex has become part of a Nutanix architecture. That went into a general just within the past month or two, so they've completed that, which they announced last year. This is another example of it.
Camberly, are we going to get to something that feels like one single architecture? Because when I was talking to Nutanix, and they were saying 75% of people are still running 3-tier architectures after all these years. And will those people give up on that and move to something new, or it seems like they're pretty attached?
Yeah, they're pretty attached. I think how I see this is last year they announced the PowerFlex, which is we had seen that offering, which used to be called Scale IO, and then it was some redesign, et cetera, rolls out as PowerFlex at Dell, being deployed in very, very, very large organizations that were deploying VDI environments, which, if you understand where Nutanix came from, that is the core. That was the core of their business initially. That was many, many years ago. They've clearly expanded out into the database market, and now they're into the Kubernetes space, et cetera. But one of the things about clients is that they needed, in order to really significantly scale, it was difficult to do so with the current architecture. And so PowerFlex enabled this significant space for them to go and build out the storage space. At the time they announced this, when we sat down with the organizations, we understood that they were going to open this aperture to other companies. So this is the second company that they're opening that aperture to. They've enabled NVMe capabilities with there, so should be some being able to address the database applications that they want to address on that box. So probably we'll see some sort of performance data maybe coming out of Nutanix that is a higher level performance than where they've been before on the database side, possibly because of how they're going to operate within that space. So this does expand their TAM because they can get into bigger environments. And I'll have one other commentary. You asked, does this mean 75% of the areas are still 3-tier? Yes. And some of that's because it's bare metal. I'm going to run my database on a bare metal environment. I don't want to run it on a VM, which you need to do if you're sitting with Nutanix. That changes your I/O that you have in your transaction speed. So that what we've seen in the very large organizations, they'll put Nutanix in for selected applications. On the smaller organizations, maybe it's ubiquitous across the board.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask her something because I wanted to ask Camberly one thing. What we're hearing from Nutanix is that the PowerFlex, architecture is kind of a one-off. They see that as a one-off, whereas the Pure Storage one is one that they see maybe being more of a model that they can replicate and even turn to a kind of a self-certification mode for multiple storage companies. What do you think about that?
That's correct, because what they used in this situation is they used their flow, which is their software-defined networking. And so there's this software-defined networking capability that it's tying into, whereas the PowerFlex, they're not using the SDN capability that they have. So there should be an easier mode forward in terms of the implementation. The question I'll have is, how they're going to position the two of these. One, clearly, Nutanix has ramped up their business with Dell because of the Broadcom situation. So the VX rail is down, the Nutanix box is coming up in terms of revenue. And as they go out there in that market, they're going to promote their PowerFlex capabilities for the high-speed environment. So I think there's two different plays, but you're right. There is a better implementation, I wouldn't say it's better right now because I haven't been into the core details on it. But I would say that it's more streamlined.
Camberly, a question for you about this. One thing about Pure Storage also is with our hyperconverged infrastructure, they use Kubernetes for managing that. I don't believe Nutanix does for storage, but they do. I think you use containers for some of that. Is that any kind of a plus? I mean, they use Kubernetes elsewhere within Nutanix. Do you think that's any kind of a plus on the storage side that Pure Storage brings?
I'm not sure I understand your question completely. You're asking the question. So Pure Storage brings for Kubernetes, they promote Portworx, but they also have a CSI connector with FlashArray. So when they go to market, if I've got a pure Kubernetes environment, Portworx is going to be a better play for them because of the capabilities that has, especially and some of the things that they've done in the VM environment. That's really top line. So I think we're talking maybe have to look
Two
at
different things.
Yeah, two different
You
things.
saved me a question to them, so thanks.
Stephen, are you out there? Stephen, you are my favorite storage geek, and all this stuff is running by and through NVMe. And yet, I feel like we've been talking about NVMe for a while, but I don't see a lot of it being deployed yet. So where are we on this curve? Because all these new systems seem to be dependent upon NVMe.
Well, maybe you're just not seeing it. It certainly is being deployed a lot of places. I just think it's not sexy. It's not the headline. There certainly is a lot of NVMe. We're seeing a lot of alternatives to Fiber Channel being rolled out. I was just talking about optical SAS the other day with a company. It's funny looking at this though. Nutanix has really transformed, haven't they, from where they were to where they are today. I was looking the other day at a video from Tech Field Day 8 back in September of 2011 when Nutanix debuted at Tech Field Day. They had a big banner at the front of the room that said "Virtualize without SAN" and a big "No SAN." Remember, Camberly, the circle, the slash through the SAN? Well, now they do SAN, and they just announced as well this Project Beacon, the cloud native version of the storage platform that runs all in Kubernetes, no virtualized. So I guess all those words have changed, but that's how companies evolve. And what I look at these solutions, the collaboration with Pure, for example, with Dell, basically everything Nutanix has done over the years has been adapting with customer demand. And if they feel that there's a big demand for NVMe-based storage and native integration with Pure Storage, then that's the direction they're willing to head for. And I like that because a company that was once religious in their beliefs about how infrastructure should be is now very pragmatic in meeting the customers where they are.
The irony of that you brought up, Steve, is that when HCI, hyperconverged, first came out, the long pole in the tent there's how the storage capability performed. It didn't make a difference. The server was fine, flat out, whatever. And so if you understand kind of where this came from, it was something called Versto that was bought by VMware. VMware rolled that out as vSAN. vSAN became hyperconverged system called VxRail. Nutanix came out. Those guys were from, guess where they came from? They came out and did that. So when we were looking at all these HCIs, what we were looking at is how those HCIs were implementing the storage environment because that was going to dictate the performance of those systems at that time.
What a
So
tangled web.
Yeah, so when I read that piece about them, the Project Beacon coming out and where they're at with that, I was like, wow, that's like coming all the way around the circle back to where we started from.
Well,
That's-
and Nutanix has moved quite strongly into compute for the last maybe 4 years. Networking may be, Flow has pretty limited functionality, so networking may be, strictly third tier for them. That might be a great strategic decision, but if you think about the purchase of D2iQ last year and now its relaunch as NKP, Nutanix Kubernetes platform, which is actually a sort of a platform of platforms, as well as their development of AHV on top of KVM. They started out with that being VMware. They decided to go with KVM and open source. I won't go into it. There's a pretty extensive product line right now around compute as well. So I think at the very worst, they would have to reach certain limitations if they are limiting their growing compute customers to HCI and to that storage form. So whether it's necessity or not, I do think Rajiv Ramaswamy, their CEO, brought some calm as well as some vision into Nutanix when he joined, and they're realizing that strategy right now. And then the Broadcom gift came back a year and a half ago. They're riding a wave that's partially of their own making,
And they also starting to look and smell a lot more like VMware. So that's attracting to a lot of people who are VMware customers.
in a good way. Yes, okay.
I think it's in a much different way. And to that point, Guy, what the other piece that they really released was their integration with NVIDIA's microservices, NIMS and NeMo. So they do have a nice platform, actually, and we saw them at call out to Tech Field Days. And I put a blog up there about what they were doing. A really nice piece of easy button kind of operations. I mean, what they've bundled together here is something that you can roll in my mind, is for those guys that do not even want to have the integrated systems that are maybe from, some of the big 3-letter companies or like Dell or HP and that kind of stuff. They want it even easier than that. And so they've done things like on the Hugging Face, they've gone through the different libraries that are there. They've validated those libraries. They've selected the best ones for you. So you can just click on it, select a library. It populates how you're going to, what GPUs, what memory you need, et cetera. And then you're just off and going. I'm sure it's a little bit more difficult than that, but it was pretty slick stuff that they did show us. So yeah,
It's an interesting alternative or competitor to Red Hat's acquisition of Neural Magic, which is also about getting AI apps into production. So a different approach, but it's interesting to see that come to fruition. That people are working on how do we get this stuff in production.
yeah, and that would have to get. I mean, with Red Hat, you're still having to install it. Now IBM is putting together Fusion, which is their hyper-converged system kind of thing but it's coming from IBM. And also, going back to it all matters is with the storage, it's sold by the storage team. But that is their AI platform box that they're rolling out. So,
Yeah. Stephen?
Yeah. I was just going to mention that, as Camberly said, we did just hear from Nutanix on their converged AI solution. Another company I think that we should call out too is HPE, which also has a nice converged AI solution as well. It seems like that's the direction that a lot of these companies are headed. And I think that, again, that's smart because customers are hungry for it.
Yeah, not to leave out Google Cloud, which has their inference in a box.
no, storage is just noisy, so we do everything we can to make it not noisy.
All right. Well, it sounds sexy over here. Who knew? Let's take a break on Techstrong Gang. Let's come back and talk about IDP idiosyncrasies. Can't wait. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Join CruiseCon Virtual on May 22nd, 2025 for breakthrough strategies to address advanced threat intelligence, proactive incident response, exclusive bonus material, and regulatory adaptation. Hear from our keynote speaker, Admiral Michael S. Rogers, former director of the National Security Agency, and an outstanding lineup of industry experts as they navigate emerging threats, the core principles of crisis management, and the evolution of CISO leadership. Register now for free.
All right, and we're back as promised, talking about IDPs, which may stand for Internal Developer Platform or Portal, depending on your viewpoint sometimes. But Pulumi is previewing a new IDP that they're talking about that they're going to give away to their existing customer base. And their argument is that, well, the ones that we have out there already are just too damn hard to manage and too difficult to set up. And otherwise, you just can't live with it. And this seems to be a common theme we hear about a lot of open source technologies. But Mitch, what's your take on what's going on here? IDPs are core to platform engineering. That's about the only thing we all agree on.
Well, it is a common place where people start with platform engineering. Not always, but it's about the developer experience, developer productivity. Often the developers are considered the customers of platform engineering, at least one of the primary ones. I think you hit the real key phrase, which is who are customers of Pulumi. It isn't really an independent offering, but it's entering a market of a wide range of technologies, options that people have. Of course, everybody tends to talk about Backstage as one of the, or Crossplane as a couple of the primary ones, but Manatech has one, OpsLevel has one. It's not quite like belly buttons. Not everybody has an IDP, but there are a lot of folks that do. So there's a lot of choice out there, and I think the main point of it is what's the ease of implementation, and is it something that developers will use? Because if they won't use it, it isn't worth the effort. And given that it's brought to market by Pulumi, an infrastructure as code kind of provider, very much could be tailored to the platform engineers. I'd want to see how well the uptake with the developers are.
So I don't think so when you're a platform engineer and you're picking an IDP for my developers to work on, am I more concerned about, I got to pick something that the developers are going to like so that they use it? Or am I more concerned with, I need to pick an IDP that fulfills kind of my mission statement, which is to allow these guys to go faster in a more secure way and make it happen. So look, platform engineering plays to an internal audience, primarily developers and DevOps and SREs. And so, how customer-centric are they in picking IDPs? If you listen to Pulumi, they should be very developer-centric and pick something developers are going to like. But
something well is if there's a crowd who will work around your solution that they don't like, it's developers. So I think adoption is number one on my list, because adoption will lead to hopefully productivity and more centralization, common tools, things like that. Because if they aren't going to use it, it's certainly, you're not going to help yourself any.
I think that's the subtle point that gets overlooked in this whole platform engineering conversation is you got to treat the developers like they're your actual customers. And a lot of the folks that run platforms don't often have that mindset.
No, they don't.
And
Well,
that's the risk of a platform company coming up with an IDP too, is, anytime you have a company really getting out of their traditional market, you have to ask, do they have the chops and the understanding in order to deliver a product outside that market? And this is not a dig on Pulumi by any means. Every time we see that in almost any industry, almost any type of product, there's always that question. And sometimes it succeeds because they actually do have insight into that market, and sometimes it doesn't because they build something that's just not fit for purpose.
Exactly. Speaking of platform engineering, I just feel compelled to say, hey, we're going to be at PlatformCon June 25th in New York City. That whole week is the virtual PlatformCon event. There's live events in Paris, London, and New York. I don't know, 35 to 40,000 people have registered for this. So it should be, if you're into platform engineering, that's a great place to find out. Or, of course, platformengineering.com, our own site dedicated to it. And our platform engineering podcast and video series, the Platform Engineering Show. Okay. Guys, do we got anything else? Mike, you're at there. You're at Nutanix all day today as well, yeah?
I am here all day and then into the evening, and then tomorrow morning we're have one more last chat, and then I'm heading back on the fabulous Amtrak train, subsidized formerly by the United States government.
Formally. Camberly, I know you're in California now. Any plans to go back home to Colorado anytime soon?
Hoping heading back on Monday. We'll see.
Fantastic. Good luck. I hope everything's well. Look forward to seeing you again here soon. Robert, hey man, keep doing what you're doing. Look forward to seeing you on another Techstrong Gang. I look forward to seeing you on another Techstrong Gang. But until then, happy Friday, everyone. As usual, we have a full Techstrong TV lineup immediately following. I don't know if you caught our Tech Field Day live presentations this week, but if you didn't, you could probably catch them on their YouTube channel or on Techstrong TV. Did I mention the OTT app? We now have an OTT app for Techstrong TV. So if you're on Apple TV or Roku or Amazon Fire or Google or Apple, go download Techstrong TV because you just can't get enough. Until this Monday then, on behalf of Techstrong Gang, this is Alan Schimmel. Have a great weekend. We're out.